Hey, welcome. Doug Smith, broadcasting here from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Welcome to the Recovery and Performance Show. And today we're going to get into some details about recovery and performance and how it relates to change. But first, I'd like to invite in my co-host, Dr. Laurie Davis, from Drayton Valley, Alberta. Laurie, good to see you. Good to see you.
Hey,
Thanks for coming in today. I know how busy you are with the other shows and everything that are happening. It's so crazy right now. What
I know.
and the way that we're getting the message out there is it really seems to be working. And the people I'm talking to that have come on the show are really happy. And I'm so excited to have Kurt David back,
Mm.
former professional basketball player, 6'9". So much has happened in the last 4 or 5 months since we talked. I mean, it's incredible, and his work on change is just cutting through the crap, down in the United States, right out of Michigan. And we're looking forward to talking to him about how that's going and how it's being welcomed into the business world in the US. And you know what, I learned from playing for the Los Angeles Kings that the US was just a hair ahead of us. So we got good things coming if Kurt David's philosophy is working down there.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
Kurt was one of our very first guests to help
Mhm.
launch our show
Yes, he
back in
was.
May. And I because I keep records, I have records. And so I'm really excited to have him back. And he's had a lot happen too. So yes, I heard, I learned this weekend that we're probably on 15 different platforms. Your home TV, which I'll provide the link today,
Oh,
um,
excellent.
has
Fantastic.
published, has put up 16 episodes. And
Wow.
what they're doing is Kathy looks at all of our shows throughout the week and she just pulls from the ones that she think that would be really good for your home TV. So it's a mixture of the Today Show and the Press Box. And I'll provide the link, and people can just go into the link and view our episodes on your home TV. And that's
That's
puts us into the US of A. So Mr. Kurt David better just catch on here, and
yeah, yeah.
and we'll get him going too. So
And
yeah.
we got coming out of the U.S. On the 20th of August. It looks like Tony McKegney is going to be joining us. He's the third Black player to ever play in the NHL,
Oh,
and he and I got to know each other through parliamentarian Gord Brown, and he introduced us, and we played against each other all those years, and grew up not too far, like we're living not too far
oh,
apart,
wow.
and we found each other and
Oh,
Tony
wow.
was living in Ontario. He wanted to get back to the US. He was challenged with a lot of things, and his kids were living in the US. So we put together a plan, and over about 3 years, we got him back down into Buffalo to live near his kids and be
Oh,
happy, because he wasn't happy being away from his family, right? So
no,
he's got
no.
a great story, though. Third Black player to ever play. And there's one of the things that stands out with Tony, with me, that when he told me one day, he said, I didn't know that being called the N word was wrong until I was in my 50s.
Serious.
Because he grew up in hockey, like in 19
Yeah.
in the late 60s and 70s, and he was the only Black kid, and so like in Saskatchewan, right, with an all
Yeah.
white family.
Wow.
And so he made it all the way to the NHL. But because his name was McKegney, um, they when he was in his early career, they brought him into a U.S. town. They wanted him to come play there, and when he arrived, he was Black, and so they literally like sent him back because he didn't want
Oh,
to, like, his experience in life like has been so phenomenal. But he's always been like one of the greatest teammates, like like
oh,
everybody speaks so highly about him. He never wanted to hurt anybody, but he could have hurt anybody he wanted to, because he's just a big strong guy, right? But he played fair, and he took the abuse. He just continually took the abuse, like continuously. It's a phenomenal
oh.
story.
We welcome you to advertise and promote your goods and services, and or brand your logo to 34 million subscribers on Canada Talks 167. Your investment will go towards our employment programs in the media industry for persons with disabilities and veterans. The day is set. Join us October 12th, 2024 at Carrigan Arms for our next fundraiser in honor of veterans, the Invictus Games in British Columbia, Canada, and TDC employment program enrollment. For more information, email us at info@thedisabilitychannel.ca.
Wow. Well, we know another big, tall, tough guy, so maybe we should bring him in.
Yeah. Let's. I don't want to drop the gloves with this guy. I
No.
just saw him at Notre Dame about a year ago, and it's always great to see you, Kurt David. It's how is it down there in Michigan these days?
Hey, great. Thanks, Dr. Davis. Thanks, Doug. It's always great to see you two again. And yeah, those glory days are over as far as dropping the gloves. Believe me, those were, I don't go by years, I go by pounds. That was about 40 pounds ago. So
There you go.
times have changed. Yeah. But anyway, no, what I love about what you're doing is you're making some positive noise, right? We're all trying to remain relevant and make some noise in this noisy environment we live in today. And making some positive noise is probably one of the best things we can do. And you two are definitely doing that with all the different shows you have going on. What a great guest you have coming up here as well, from what you described just now, Doug.
Yeah, well, recovery and performance, we're both in the same world. You and I live in the world of change. You hit it right on the nose, right? And I work on the background, trying to figure out the answers with you. So that's our relationship. And how far back do you and I go? This is an amazing story how we met.
You were one of my guests on the TV show. I have a TV show from Glory Days that we interview former professional athletes about life after pro sports and what that transition is like. And of course, those people that know you, Doug, know your story of transition, and it was very abrupt, very sudden with your injury while playing. And so, but your story of how you overcame that from taking a tragedy into a triumph is what is amazing. And we've had you on the show twice, 2 different seasons as a result.
Yes.
But that's how we first met. We flew you here to Detroit to tape. And then we're like, oh, we got to get Doug back next season. Let's get him back again. So we got you back again. And it's great to hear your story and great to tell people your story.
It was a world-class opportunity. I mean, it was phenomenal. And I don't think the viewers might not know this, but I try to mention it to everybody that Kurt, is an Emmy Award winner, right? And for his show From Glory Days, and they put on a first class 5-star environment when I went down there to spend time. So, thank you very much for that.
No, appreciate that. Yeah, we're just trying to get the word out and use stories from former athletes, and now we'll get into veterans as well. And that's a new show we have out as well. We can talk about that later as well.
Now tell me, you were an athlete, and I have my own opinions on this, and you're dealing with soldiers now, and we all get along great. I mean, I know you probably do too, but what do you see as the difference and the similarities between former professional hockey or athletes, I should say, and military operatives?
Well, probably the biggest difference that they remind me of, especially from the military side, is the paychecks. Right? The difference in paychecks. So, when pro athletes go through a transition, they take probably a 95% pay cut, right? When they go from playing professional to back to the real world, unless they're smart with their money, most of them are taking 95% pay cuts. Military, not so much, right? When you come out of the military, you don't have that major pay cut. So that's probably one of the biggest differences between the two, but there's many, many parallels, right? When you look at a pro athlete going in transition, you go from being inside the locker room to suddenly you're outside the locker room. You go from having all the support in the world to all of a sudden you got to find your support. You go from being on a schedule to all of a sudden you're making your own schedule. And it's very parallel to what the military go through as well.
I try to mention to the audience too, that the conditioning from the age of 5 to be a professional athlete is a little bit different than the conditioning from the age of 17 and 18 when you enter the military. Like, I've never been shot at. We share a lot of similar issues, but there is a fundamental difference between how old we were when we started taking, let's say, enemy fire. Right?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. And you're right about the age difference, because, you would think that people that join the military are a little more formative in their years, a little more developed. As an athlete, you start young, you started gravitating towards a sport either because of your size or because of your physical attributes. But, a lot of the military, in fact, the former military, I've talked to some that they say, hey, what I was trained to do so well, I can no longer do legally, right? And so,
Yes.
if I'm a special forces trained for a very specific task, and when I come out to civilian life, I can't do that legally, right? I just can't do that. And so it's a transition of what their skills are. As an athlete, you might still be able to keep that skill, right? Depending on the sport, definitely not the same level of play, but you're able to keep that skill at least and still play. I know, like with you still put the skates on every once in a while, but are also involved with other sports, ping pong and different things that you do to maintain your attributes.
Yes. And Laurie, do you have any input?
Yes, in the veterans that I've been not only interviewing on the air but working with privately, their big challenge is that sometimes, when you mentioned, Kurt, about they get looked after, a lot of them have had to really fight to be looked after, and don't really know how to maneuver the governmental system to get the pensions that they're entitled to. So I've worked with a few of those who really struggled. One gal I know, she worked for 18 years through the legalities of everything to get her money.
Wow.
So sometimes there's a fight. So then what happens? Perhaps the less educated or the less persistent or the less whatever get frustrated and give up. And that's why we have some of our veterans on the streets.
Yeah, on the streets or unfortunately taking their own lives as a result. Yeah, no, it's very sobering. I hear often, there's a 22 every day, or I mean, it's a sobering
22 a
amount.
day.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's very sad amount, no question about it. I mean, I often hear veterans talk about how, boy, I have $1 million worth of benefits that I'm just not sure how to access, right? What's the red tape to navigate through?
Yeah, I mean, the maneuvering process,
Well, because they've made it difficult.
Yeah, so they made it confusing. So you need you need to have that map, and that's what Veterans House is doing, and that's why Veterans House is involved with the Disability Channel now, just because we want to help people, like, uncomplicate things, and it should be checkbox. There's in this day and age, some machine should be making whatever they've got to accomplish and the information they've got to get from you in a checkbox format. Just check yes or check no, and it should be that simple. And I think we're going to get to that, but it takes a long time to change that old system, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. And we'll have to get my radio partner on. His name is Josh Perry. She and his wife started an organization called Vet Life or Vet Fest. They have a Vet Fest, but they also have Vet Life. They call it vetlifetoday.org. They're starting an app called Battle Buddy, in which veterans can access on the app all their services, all their records. They're in the process of rolling that out and making it nationwide in the United States. And so we're working on that right now. That's one of the projects he's working on with his organization. It's called Battle Buddy, and it's an opportunity for veterans to just put on this app, get into this app, and then they can put in their information, and boom, it pulls up all the access that they need. And so it just makes sense to make it that much more easily for them to access their information, as well as their the benefits that they've earned as a result. I mean, he told me something sobering. He said that the records for a veteran, at least in the United States, when they come out of military service to become a civilian, that they get one opportunity for a hard copy, and then if they don't get it at that point, it could be a very difficult process to access those again. That they're not digitized, right? For one, they're not digitized, so I have to get a physical copy. And he's really looking to change that somehow, to get them digitized so people can access them much more fluidly, like you're describing.
Yeah, it's not like the military and that whole machine is ever going to go away in the history of humankind. So you might as well get to work making it simpler, you think. But here's the challenge with change, Kurt, and you can comment on this. I could go to the brigadier general in charge of the 1st Division of the Canadian Armed Forces and say, this thing has to change. And he would go, yeah. And I would say, okay, we're going to change it, but here's what has to happen. You have to sacrifice your own job, because the work that has to be done is so insane that they're going to hang you out to dry. And so that person who's in charge isn't willing to slit their own throat to make the changes they actually know have to be made. They're aware of this, but they're constrained, right, by the finances and by the system that they've created. But you can comment on that, don't you? You see the same thing, right?
Well, I think it's not just the military or pro athletes. I see it in organizations all the time too, that they're slow to change or slow to make those transitions that they know are the right change or transition to make. It's just they're difficult to do, and sometimes people don't want to make hard choices or do hard things, right? I mean, you learn that as an athlete. That's why only 1/10 of 1% of people are professional athletes, right? Because it's hard work. It takes a lot of focus and time and energy. And same thing when it goes through the change process. It's not always easy, and sometimes people don't enjoy that because of the fact that they know how much work it's going to take. But that's one of the great things that I think that we offer people, is we're able to offer processes and protocols and a path for them to understand, okay, boy, this isn't as scary as I thought it was, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, a check, like we were just talking about it, the checkbox, checkbox to change, right? That's what people need today. And if you could tell people a story and give them the experience, and then share the science, and then put a couple of solutions that you know work in front of them, so they're not just pigeonholed into one idea or one option. They've got a few options in front of them, and they can pick any one they want. And you can't push it on people because they resist change, right? So tell me how you get them to move towards this thing called change, Kurt, because you speak to large rooms of people, right?
Yeah, small and large. I think anywhere from, in my history of speaking, from 5 people to 5,000 and everywhere in between, right? And so it's been an interesting journey. But I think the biggest thing, Doug and Dr. Davis, is understand, human nature. And first of all, Heraclitus said it best. Heraclitus was from 500 BC. He said, and this is his quote from 500 BC, "The only constant in life is change." He's the one attributed to that quote. So you think about it, 500 BC, people have been talking about change for thousands of years. So this is not new. This is not a new topic. No. This is not something that all of a sudden in the last century, wow, let's talk about change. No, people have been talking about change for centuries. And so it's nothing new. And so when I look at human nature, and I happen to have a master's in counseling, and so I always refer to that when I look at human nature. And unfortunately, a lot of times when people look at change, if you look at the primal side of it, right? And Doug, you're really good at this, right? The neuroscience, the primal side of things, subconscious side, that fear is directly attached to change. That a lot of times when we think and look at that primal side of our brain and looking at change, people attach that to fear. And you think about throughout mankind, any change became life-threatening in many cases for people. And so you start on that premise that, okay, yeah, we understand it could be scary. Some people embrace it. Other people are like, no. It's ironic, and to share a little personal note, I happen to be married to a woman that doesn't like change, right? And so it's funny how us opposites attract sometimes. And so
you get to practice. Somebody to practice on. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
good.
I get the resistance, like, oh no, let's not do that. No, this will be good. This change will be good. And so, but yeah, I think one of the biggest things is leveling the playing field, right? And you do that by, I use visual analogies, right? I'm a visual person, so I like using visual analogies. And what I say is it's always easier to grab the next or leave the next vine that I'm sorry, let me rephrase it. It's easier to leave the vine that I'm holding on to when I see the next vine, or even can grab that next vine that I'm going to grab onto, right? If I'm swinging through the trees, I don't want to let go of the other vine unless I see the other vine, or even better yet, if I have a hold of it. And that's part of the change process, is identifying that vine, having a strategic plan of how I'm going to get to that vine, what it looks like, what it's going to feel like, what the process is. And so helping people understand, it's hard to let go of that vine unless you see the other vine, or even better yet, if you can hold it. Then it's easier to let go of the other vine, if that makes sense.
Yes. And how do you see it scaling? Okay, so when you deliver your message to an individual, it's one way, right? And when you deliver your message to a room of 400 people, it's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's a process. You lay out a process for people to understand that, it starts off with a strategic plan. It starts off with goal setting. It starts off with understanding the change process, and then it progresses from there. It's like a step by step. And what I love about what you guys are doing is, you have an idea of the scientific side of this, right?
Mhm.
I come from a very practical. My experiences are very practical in the sense that I've experienced it myself. I experience it with other people that are going through it. And I research and study as a result of it and look at it and say, I try to simplify things and break it down. I don't have the neuroscience to it. This is where I think where you really have worked hard at is looking at what's the neuroscience behind this. I can tell you all day long from a practical side, boy, this is what it looks like. This is the steps. This is how you do it. But you're looking at the neuroscience, which is the actual science behind it, which is amazing to me. I mean, marrying those two together, that's why it's great to have these conversations.
Well,
Because
philosophy and neuroscience are coming together, and the reason they're coming together is because of artificial intelligence.
what do you mean?
Because the whole world is trying to see if artificial intelligence is going to be able to take over mankind. Okay,
Mm,
and that's not going to happen, not in the near future, because artificial intelligence is missing one important point, and that's consciousness, because
correct.
consciousness has been identified as a separate piece of anatomy. Okay, so you got physical, and you've got the emotional or psychological, and then you've got consciousness, and each one needs to be nurtured in its own way. And settling the brain through meditation, and you can download my meditation at dougsmithperformance.com/relax. But when you meditate, now they're measuring this, and they can see the difference it makes to the glue that holds the physical and the emotional together. So we're not working on our consciousness. We're busy working on our emotional, and we're busy working on our physical, and but nobody's saying just stop for a second. Okay, breathe.
Yeah.
Because when you
I
breathe,
do. I
when
do.
you when you breathe, you're working on your consciousness when you breathe properly, right? And you don't know it, you don't feel it, but you're actually doing that. So anyways, I run on and on. So
Well, for good reason. But I think it's your term that I've heard you say quite often, Doug. The 600, the 800-pound gorilla, whatever gorilla weighs these days,
yes.
600-pound gorilla in a room, right? Is that subconscious, conscious mind that is driving people that we sometimes aren't aware of and need to be aware of as a result.
And how do you help people see what they couldn't see before? Now you've put it in a series of letters, right? Like
Yeah, acronym. Yeah.
you put it in an acronym, makes it easy for people. But maybe can you run through that, please, for us?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I call it my 5 rules of change. RULES. I'm a simple guy. And so I like to keep things simple. And what I noticed through my research with former professional athletes, well, first of all, going through my own transition as an athlete, 30, 40 pounds ago, as I mentioned, not by years, but by pounds, going through my own transition and then writing a book and then writing multiple books and then interviewing athletes and working with former athletes and then getting in organizations and now veterans, I started seeing a pattern. And one of the things I look for as a counselor is always look for patterns, right? And so I see a pattern of 5 things that kept happening over and over again for the ones that were having success. So as they're going through these transitions and change, I saw the pattern and I said, wow, there's 5 things that keep happening over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And so being the simple mind that I am, I thought, boy, I need to create an acronym so I can remember these 5 things. And that's how I created the acronym RULES, RULES. And that's why I call it my 5 rules of change. And those who might have heard it before, we can go through this again, but this is going to be the crib note version. We could spend a whole half day on this very easily and delve deep and get into it. But the first letter R stands for refocus. What I've discovered is that anybody going through a transition, I don't care if you're a pro athlete, a veteran, organization, a marriage, whatever that transition might be, there's a refocus. And what that refocus is, it's taking a look at current goals and reestablishing new goals. It's developing a strategic plan. If it's an organization, it's pulling in stakeholders that are going to have an input on that change. And so you want to pull those people into it as well as part of the refocus. If I can give an example, we can't talk about sports and we can't be in Canada without talking about beer, right? And so
that's true. Yes, I'm getting thirsty.
Yeah, and so if you look at what happened in the United States on January 16th in 1920, for us history buffs, on January 16th, 1920, 1,273 breweries were told they could no longer brew beer or sell beer, right? Prohibition hit in the United States on January 16th, 1920. 1,273 businesses basically were told, you can't do that anymore. So through my research, I discovered that 244 still remained open when Prohibition was over. So my thought was, well, we know what happened to the 80% that closed, right? It's very obvious, right? Why they closed. So I started digging deeper into, boy, what did these 244 do to remain open? And one of them I really did a lot of research on had a refocus. When that change happened, they had a refocus. They went from brewing beer to brewing malt extract, ginger ale. They were even making car and auto parts. And as a result, Anheuser-Busch not only remained open, but they became the largest brewery in the world, selling for I don't know how many billions of dollars years ago, because they had a refocus during that change and transition. And that's just one example of the refocus that needs to occur or can occur during the transition.
So refocus, number one.
The U stands for using your network. In other words, all of us have a vast network of people around us. And I always say internal and external. So as an example, if I want to use that Anheuser-Busch example, they went from brewing beer to all of a sudden malt extract, ginger ale, and they already have a distribution path in place, right? They already had a network of organizations that helped distribute their beer. But they tapped into that network to say, hey, listen, we're no longer brewing beer, but we got malt extract. We have ginger ale. Can you help us distribute that? So they tapped into their network to help them with their refocus. In other words, any individual going through a change, look at your internal or external network to say, who can help me with this?
Your entire ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, something I always want to qualify when I talk about this is I'm not talking about using and abusing people, right? I'm not talking about, boy, this is my goal and I'm going to use this person to get what I want. I'm talking about creating win-win, right? When you go into this, when you're tapping into your network internally or externally, you want to make sure you're creating a win-win relationship with those people or organizations, whatever it might be as a result. So that's the U. R-U. The next letter, L, bar none, without argument, no discussion, is the most difficult for pro athletes. And that's letting go. Letting go. And the reason why, it's in the marrow of our bones to never give up, right? You know, fall down 7, get up 8. Swinging many times, right? We fall down 7 and we get up 8 and we're punching at that point, right? And so that's kind of the marrow of our bones. And so for athletes, it's very difficult. And for many people, it's very difficult. And when I talk about letting go, let's say we talk about organization, there's certain things we have to let go of. Sometimes it's the wins, sometimes it's the losses. I had a conversation with an executive from Ford Motor Company, right? We all might have heard of them, Ford Motor Company. And I was talking to this executive. Yeah, they still are. And I asked him, I said, how did you guys get through 2008 during that economic downturn when, you know, the other major car companies were taking government bailouts? And I said, how did Ford do this? And he gave me a list of things they did. But one of the things he said was, he said, you know, we had to let go of something. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, we were spending millions of dollars telling people that quality was job one, right? All the Ford marketing was quality is job one. There was TV commercials, there was print ads. He said, we realized we had to let that go because we weren't doing it to the best of our ability. We weren't creating job, you know, quality wasn't job one for us. And he said, once we had that refocus and started recreating our quality and making it even better and letting that go, that we weren't doing it, he said, things turned around. We started making profits, started making a good product. And so it really helped them by letting that go. And everybody has their own timetable individually, right, for letting go. Great example of that is I had an Olympic athlete that contacted me out of Houston. He reached out to me about a week after he got back from the Olympics. He said, hey, I just won a bronze medal in the Olympics. And I heard you talk to people about, you know, transitions in sports. And I said, okay, you got my attention. Congratulations on the medal and everything in the Olympics. And so we started
Wow.
talking about this refocus, right? This letting go. And we got to the point of looking at what he wanted to do. That was part of his strategic plan and refocus. We started looking at his network, who would be strategic for him to reach out to. We got to the letting go point and he just couldn't do it. He's like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to let it go yet. I don't know if I want to commit another 4 years of my life. I don't know if I want it ready to let it go. So 6 months of back and forth conversation weekly.
Wow.
He finally is like, yeah, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to move forward. And he's doing great now. He did some work. He was a gymnast. So he did some work with Cirque du Soleil for a while in LA. Now I understand he's doing some stunt work for Hollywood, doing things of this sort for stunt work now. But he let go, but it took him a long time. In contrast, I had a phone call from a Major League Baseball agent who said, hey, my pitcher just got released in spring training. Can you sit down with him? So we started working through the 5 rules of change. And within a week, he's like, Kurt, I'm done. I'm not being a pro athlete anymore. I'm going to move forward. He was able to accelerate his change because he let go of the fact that, yeah, I'm not a pro athlete. I'm pretty focused now. I know what my new goals are and where I'm heading. And so everybody's different, though, but it's an important aspect of moving forward, of letting go. It's very important.
100% of athletes need to, but a very tiny percent of athletes ever do.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I mean, it's a small number, and if they do, they become so much happier.
Yes.
So much more content, so much less alone, so much, less isolated. Don't you find?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's part of their mental health is
Yes.
understanding that. I use an analogy of the Roman Empire, right? I like history too. You're going to find I like acronyms. You're going to find I like history. During the Roman Empire, when the generals would come home from conquering lands, let's say a general conquered Alexandria, and they would come back to Rome and they had these big parades for the general, right? It was like a Super Bowl parade or a Stanley Cup parade back at the hometown. And what they would do is a general would be going through the parade of they call them campaign. If you can look it up in history, it's called a campaign in the Roman Empire. And the general would be going through in his chariot. They even had their family in a chariot behind them, all dressed in white. But this is written in history, and you can read this, that as the general is going through all these accolades and all this praise about coming back from this conquering land, they have somebody on the general's chariot saying, all glory is fleeting. All glory is fleeting. So here he's getting all these accolades and going through this parade, but he's being reminded, so what? What's next? Let go, right? And it's just a reminder for all of us that, in sports, it's easier to get to the top of the mountain than it is to stay on top of the mountain.
Yeah, you can get swept up in it. It's like a tidal wave, man. There's nothing you can do about it. That's what you're saying, right? It sweeps you away.
Yeah. And it could be that way. I could be the best salesman in my department, but it doesn't matter. What's next, right? You're going to do it again next year, or you're going to do something else. And so constant change, constant transition, even at that level, right? Regardless of what I do, whether I'm a pro athlete, a veteran, a salesperson.
Are we seeing a unified approach, Kurt, to this epidemic issue? Like, are you seeing the league say, hey, we're going to do something that's, not collusion, I mean, collusion is just all over the place, right? Because it's a different economy. So are you seeing it happening?
I think to a certain level, I think they're putting, they're getting a lot of negative press. And so, if you look at the NFL as an example, there's a lot of negative press for these athletes because bankruptcy rates, divorce rates are so high, even domestic violence,
anger.
Right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And so they're doing some service, some of it I think is just lip service, but is it having an impact? A little bit, but the way I frame it, and I had a conversation with the president of one of the professional teams, and I asked him point blank, I said, what are you doing for your former athletes? What are you doing to help them transition? And his point blank answer, I think, says it all, right? He says, well, that's between the athlete and their agents. Because basically, you look at athletics, they're a commodity. They're a commodity. And
yeah.
For one athlete, for one athlete you haven't placed, you got 100 behind them, right?
Yeah. And
so, I get it from their business standpoint, but I think they're trying to do something about it. It's nowhere near what it could be or what but there's some organizations, there's some people that are working on it, but But back
it's
to your
it's usually here's the problem. There isn't a fair process to figure out, who should be doing this work and who shouldn't be doing this work,
correct. Yeah, there's a lot of different
right?
processes. There's lots of different opportunities and ways of doing it. It's just a matter of which one's right for which organization or for which team or which player, which veteran. And so that's why I think that's why it's important to have multiple, because what might connect with one person may not connect with another person, so to speak.
Wow, you still have to have a wider range program, right? That's servicing everybody and every single brain, not just their brain, because geez, it's not working today, and they're having trouble. It's got to be everybody's brain. That process for transformation that you talk about has to be consistent no matter who you are, or we haven't discovered the right system yet. Don't stop looking.
Yeah,
Right?
and that's why I like to keep it simple, because we could get into the weeds, we could get very detailed, and there's a time and a place for that. But bringing in the 30,000-foot level first, and then taking it down into the weeds from there. But if we go from RUL, the next letter is E, which stands for execute your plan.
Yes.
And the image I use for that is an old water pump, a hand water pump. For us older people, you remember the old water pump that you had a handle on that you had to pump, but also sometimes what did you have to do to get the water out? Not just pump it. Sometimes you had to prime it, put some water in there, right? And it's that way in the change process, right? Rarely does change happen with one pump and you get water. Usually you have to pump. Sometimes you got to pump again. Sometimes you got to reprime it, which is refocusing again. Oh boy, we got to change something here. Let's pump it again.
Take it through the same loop. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
I like using a growth model called PDCA, and it could be different names for it, but the acronym stands for plan, do, check, and adjust. And during the executing your plan process, sometimes that plan, do, check, and adjust might need to happen. In other words, you plan it, which is part of your refocus. You do it, you check the results. And to be honest, Doug and Dr. Davis, this is where a lot of people differ, the haves from the have-nots. They stop when they see it doesn't work. They plan it, they did it, they check the results. It's like, oh, it didn't work. Well, no, this is where you need to adjust and do it all over again, right? And it's that way through the change process. Rarely is it one pump and the change is happening. This is where the grit comes in. This is where the work comes in. This is times you sometimes have to adjust on the fly as you're going through the process as well. And so, that's why I like using a water pump, because it's not always a one pump and you get it right away as a result.
Like the Zig Ziglar story. Zig Ziglar had a great story about the pump, that you got to keep pumping.
Yes.
You stop pumping, the water starts going down again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's part of the change process as well, as it's just a plan, do, check, and adjust. I like using, Edison's great example of that. If we look at his process, and I have no idea what the number is. Anybody have any idea what the number is? How many times he failed when creating a light?
9,999.
Yeah, whatever that number is. I've heard 1,000. I've heard 1,000,000.
No,
Right? Everybody has
it was
different numbers.
10,000. The light bulb came on.
Oh, okay. All right. So, or did he just go through that PDCA process that many times until he finally found it? Did he execute his plan through all the changes he had to keep going through until it finally happened? And that's to me, it takes failure out of the equation, because to me, now it's just a learning process of saying, okay, yeah, it didn't work. Now let's adjust and let's do it all over again. And so, I used to think, and I thought this as an athlete, that the opposite of success was failure. That if here's success on this side of the spectrum, on the opposite side of the spectrum is failure. Then I realized failure is actually an integral part of success. I mean, you think about it, as an athlete, you take your muscle to fail, right? To build your muscle, you got to take it to fail. And I realized in life too, boy, failure is an integral part of that. Not that we purposely try to fail, but as we fail, we learn, we adjust, and we continue to execute our plan in order to go through that change as a result. So that's the RULE. The last letter, S, stands for someone. What I discovered, that everybody going through a transition, whether it be an individual or organization, has someone, a mentor, so to speak, that they tapped into to really learn from and help them through that situation.
So they're not alone, right? Another set of eyeballs is what you're saying.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody older, just somebody who's there where they want to be. As a great example of that, I mentioned about Ford Motor Company earlier. And the executive had shared with me that when they were going through 2008, they actually pulled in a mentor, somebody who had been through a very difficult change in the 80s. He actually was with Ford Motor Company before. He left Ford Motor Company to go to Chrysler to help them through a very difficult time in the 80s. And as a result, Ford Motor Company had tapped into the mentorship of Lee Iacocca in order to get through the struggles that they went through in 2008. And, I've talked to enough athletes that they had mentors to become TV broadcasters that were, a friend of mine played in the NBA for 8 years. And during that time, he was constantly going in the TV studio to learn about TV broadcasting. And now this friend of mine's been doing Detroit Pistons games for the NBA for over 30 years now as a result. So he had a mentor as a result that helped him through that. And so tapping into one person, again, it doesn't have to be somebody older, just somebody who's doing something that we want to do and to help accelerate that and learn from that.
The Disability Channel would like to thank our existing sponsors. We really appreciate the support and kindness from the BIAs across the GTA, Ontario, Canada, and our friends in the USA. We love making new friends. Thank you for supporting our existing employment programs.
And you're helping people do that. You have your counselor's degree, and you're speaking to audiences as well, working with a couple of agencies in the US. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that's evolved? Because there's a lot of people that listen that might want to get out there and share.
Yeah. Well, I'm having fun. My purpose on this earth is to serve God and serve others. And the way I do that is using the gifts and abilities that I have. And so, whether it be workshops or keynote speaking, right now we're using media, radio and TV to also get more exposure as a result with my shows from Glory Days, the radio show with veterans, and then the TV show with former athletes. And so it's exciting to me to see it continue to morph, because I think one of the most difficult things for us as we talk about change and transition is to remain relevant, right? How do we continue to remain relevant? I mean, Dr. Davis, you look at your journey throughout your life, and there's been many changes throughout your life in order to continue to remain relevant is what you're doing now. And it's admirable when you see people do that, because some people, and Doug, you can attribute to this, where you see people that are former athletes that's it, they're done. Well, they're still trying to live their glory days. And it's like, well, you're not going to continue to remain relevant 10 years from now, 15 years from now, unless you're a Hall of Fame, that is running the NHL Hall of Fame board or something. But you know what I mean by that. In other words, you need to keep doing things that are going to keep you relevant. And I mean that as an individual and organization as well.
Totally.
Yes. No, you have to keep doing that. Now, there's some people who are really, really interested in this. Like, where are you speaking these days? What do you got coming up, and who have you been speaking to lately? Just curious.
A lot of manufacturing seems like lately, because of they're going through a lot of changes. So
I got the Maryland Workers' Compensation and Educational Association. Yeah, like organizations like that, right?
Yeah, you got that coming up, don't you? You're going to be over there with them. So.
But that's the type of organization who's looking at this, right?
Yeah, associations that deal with manufacturers themselves. I think the biggest thing, you talked about AI. I think that's one of the many challenges in manufacturing right now is technology replacing workforce, right? Because you have a workforce issue. What I'm hearing in the street right now from manufacturers, you have this balance of in-person workforce and still remote workforce, right? So you have that balance that they're trying to do. And then you have the fact that, boy, are we replacing workforce with technology? More and more you see that in manufacturing world. And how do you balance that? How do you walk through that change? And those are some of the big issues that I'm hearing more and more through the manufacturing industries.
But it doesn't matter what the change is. You apply the methodology and you come out on top. I mean, but if you don't have a method to go through this change, and that's your message, right? If you don't use a method, if you're just sort of willy-nillying it all over the place, you're never going to be able to make that transformation, right? And
absolutely. Right. I call it ADHD change, right? I mean, you're all, it's like a ping pong table. You're all over the place, not sure where it's going to end up. Yeah, you have to have that, and that's part of the rules, right? That's part of the refocus. That's why it's so important at the beginning to have that refocus, because that's where the laser strategic planning comes in, and that's where you pull in the stakeholders and people that are involved with that change in order to get their input to make sure that it's locked in. I mean, I hear a lot of companies, they'll make a change. Well, did you talk to the IT people because this is going to affect? Well, no, we're just going to do this because we're going to save $400,000 a year. Okay, well, you might want to talk to the IT people if they're going to be the one implementing the change or involved with the change. And, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that story where it's like, oh yeah, no, we didn't talk to them. And so you definitely want to involve the stakeholders that are involved with that aspect of it.
So, Laurie, do you have any questions?
I added a new acronym to my dictionary.
Oh,
PDCA.
mhm.
PDCA. That was great. No, I don't have any questions. I think it's, we're all out there doing whatever it is that we can do to support. And I agree with Kurt wholeheartedly that not everything works for everybody. But, my message has never changed really in 32 years. And that's why it's even more relevant today than when I developed my own theory of how important our self-worth is attached to all of our decisions. And without that, we're not really going to implement too much. And that's been my experience. And when Doug spoke about the consciousness, when people become, and what all the work that we're all doing is we're helping people to become more aware of what's going on around them. So once I become aware, that raises my level of consciousness, which then I can put value on the fact that I do have the ability to change. There's two ways to change. You either change on your own because you realize things are dysfunctional, or something happens and you're forced to change. And I think we've all had that experience. So that's just my 2 cents worth this morning.
No, absolutely. I think awareness is the very first key. I mean, it's one of the first things you learn in counseling is helping people become aware of what's going on, whether it be their environment, whether their situations, whether it be their processes. And, awareness is always the first key, in my opinion, as well, of helping people walk through that. That's why what you do is so important, because of helping people become aware, but then also understanding their worth as a result of that, right? It's like, oh, I didn't even think about that, right? When you get those aha moments, that's the fun for me. When you have people that, whether it be a group of people or individual, and they have those aha moments like, oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. It's like, well,
That's
good.
right.
Now, hopefully you are.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. What happened yesterday?
Yesterday we did a show on denial. So what am I in denial about today? I ask myself that every single day. And if I'm in denial about something, whether it's my health or my finances or my marriage or my kids, that's a sign. And then there's behaviors that are attached to being in denial. And some people are actually in denial about being in denial. I'm not in denial, really.
Well, you know what? Can I piggyback on top of that? Because I think
Absolutely.
that's very important.
Yes.
I believe, and this was the case for me, that sometimes we're not even aware of that denial. I'll give you a great example. I sat down to the coach, and this is why it's so important to have people around us that we can trust and provide input into our lives. I sat down with the coach years ago, probably about 6 to 8 years ago, and he and I were going through my life and what's going on and what I'm doing. And he looked at me, and he was brilliant in the sense that he looked at me and he says, Kurt, he says, you're doing this, 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 and you're doing this. He says, those are all great things. They're all amazing things, what you're doing. He says, the problem is you're doing this, 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 you're doing this. He says, you're so divided. Your focus is so divided. And it was an aha moment for me to realize, wow, to me, it wasn't a denial as much as just not aware, right, of the fact that, yeah, you know what, I need to narrow my focus because I can be involved with all these great things and they are having an impact on people's lives. But if I would really want to take it to the next level, I got to get laser focused. And having and the reason why I bring that up is having someone around you to help identify aspects of denial, because we aren't always aware of what we're in denial about, or even just aware of what's going on within ourselves. And so having people around like yourselves that can help people become aware of that is so important.
And your show on veterans, there's a lot of cross-pollination that needs to happen here because perspective is everything here, right? Everybody wants to express what they know, but they don't want to look for perspective. And this is an opportunity for us here with your new show from Glory Days, this show, to maybe cross pollinate and share with people other perspectives of what's going on, so they know how, at times, so they know how good they have it compared to other people.
Well, and I think, I would like to think that all of us have a goal of helping other people, right? I mean, having titles is great, making money is great, but I found the real value is having an impact on people's lives. And these shows are about former professional athletes. They're about military transitioning to civilian life. But one of my goals is not just to help that population, but to have people listen to these stories and watch these stories and learn from them, to say, wow, I'm not a former professional hockey player, but boy, when Doug went through that, oh my goodness, how he overcame that and the things that he did. When I hear about this veteran story about what they had to go through in their transition, like we had Travis Mills, who's a quadruple amputee as a result of an explosion, right? He lost all 4 of his limbs, still alive. And we had him on the show. And for people to hear his story, whether they're military or not, but to be inspired and learn, wow, okay, yeah, I'm going through a rough time right now, but boy, listen to the way he handled it and what was his attitude and what did he do?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the parts, it's beyond sports, it's beyond military, in my opinion, because we can take it to people and help them understand and connect those dots, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it lines up perfectly, as we usually do. The human brain doesn't know the difference between recovery and performance. It just wants to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And we do some things to it that make it get worse, and we shouldn't do that, right? But we should be more aware, and we do things physically and psychologically to it.
Yes, 100%.
Right?
No question about it.
We pound ourselves hard. Bruce Lee used to say all the time, you never speak negatively about yourself, even as a joke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just saw something about Michael Phelps, the swimmer, the Olympic swimmer, talk about how every time he passed through a doorway, he gave himself an affirmation. Just one little every time. So think about the number of doorways we walk through in a day. He said that was
good one.
that was part of his mental training, was every time he walked through a door, he gave himself a quick affirmation, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, I love it.
Boy, you got quicker.
I'm sorry, Kurt. I keep interrupting you because I know we could talk for hours. We have. So when you talk about helping others or teaching others, I learned that I can't help anyone that's not prepared to help themselves. And I can't teach anybody anything that doesn't want to learn what I have to offer. So I thought, well, then, how do I refocus that? So I did that by asking myself 3 questions. And the first one is, why am I here? Well, I'm here to make a difference. And you may or may not be open to that, right? So then the second question is, what did I want? Well, I want to make a difference. And then the third question is, what am I willing to do to get what I want? I'm willing to continue to make a difference. So I had the same answer to all 3 questions when I decided that,
it was time.
I can't help anybody, and I can't teach anybody anything unless they are willing and ready. So some people are willing, right?
Yeah.
But they're not ready. And other people are ready, but they're not willing to do the work.
That's brilliant. It really is. I mean, it's just the way those 3 lined up. My father put a little more simple terms, the way he put it. He said, you can lead a horse to water and you can't make them drink, but you can salt their oats. So you find a way to salt their oats.
or shove their head in the trough.
Yeah. I prefer the salty oats. But yeah, we have a joke in the counseling world. You know how many counselors it takes to change a light bulb?
How many?
Doug, you know how many counselors it takes to change a light bulb?
How many?
Only one, but it has to want to change.
Yeah, there you go.
But that's a great one to end on, I guess, huh?
I guess so.
Well, no, it's always amazing having you on, and I know that, and you can tell the audience about your recovery, because it's in process right now. But
yeah, absolutely.
Kurt had a bit of a setback, and maybe you could share. Well, I say a little bit of a setback. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Go ahead.
No, because it wasn't your setback.
Yeah, no, I think, we all go through changes and transition. And I had a major one that I didn't plan on. I had a triple bypass open heart surgery 5 months ago. Wow. And thought it was heartburn for probably 3 weeks to 4 weeks, for a month. And my wife's like, you don't get heartburn. No, this is not good. You need to go see a doctor. And this is for everybody. My EKG came back normal. So I was like, oh, okay, it's not your heart. But then a week later, he had me come back again. Thank goodness. He's like, no, you shouldn't still be having heartburn. Had me do a stress test, which led into a catheterization, which led into triple bypass open heart surgery. And so, it's something as an athlete you never plan on. You hear of these athletes. In fact, ironically, I had a good friend of mine. He's a 2-time NBA champion. He passed away when I was going through this process of a heart attack. And it just was an eye-opener for me to realize, you know what, at any day, at any time, young, old, whatever, we're all susceptible. I mean, this is something that I learned during that time to not take for granted. It really caused me, and we all have these aha moments where it causes us to really look at what is important to me, what is important to my life and what I do here on this earth, because it is going to be temporary at some point, right? And so, times like this caused me to do that. And I'd like to affirm other people too. Not that we want to dwell on this, but I heard a speaker one time say this. He goes, I don't dwell on this. I don't want you to dwell on this. But he says, I think about that day when they're kicking dirt in my face and going back to the church hall to eat potato salad, what people are going to say about me at that time. And it just causes you to think, yeah, what are people going to say when I'm gone? What's the legacy I'm leaving? What is it that people are going to remember me by? Is it just for being a dork, a big 6'9" dork, kind of bumbling around in life? Or is it having an impact in people's lives, starting with my own family and moving out from there?
Right on.
You look fantastic.
Amazing.
You look in game ready shape, and Kurt's 6'9". You bring him in, he'll share with you about change, what he knows, but the presence of having the dude around is just amazing. Thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
No, it's always an honor.
Great. And I look forward to teaming up on the other show, doing whatever we can together to make it happen for veterans as well.
No, this is exciting.
Yeah.
Kurt, may I share a little show idea for you that you might want to consider that I did about a year ago?
Of course.
I brought on a panel of ladies. I couldn't find any guys at the time, but ladies my age whose dads were World War II veterans, and what it was like being brought up in the home of a veteran back from World War II.
Wow.
And we had some pretty amazing things to share.
That is a good idea. I like that. I like that a lot. Well, thank you.
My gift to you today.
We're a show that gives. That's all we do is we give, we give, we give.
Keep giving. Keep giving and giving. No, this is what it's all about. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Well, listen, have a great day. Enjoy the rest of the summer, and we'll be talking to you on a regular basis, I'm sure.
Look forward to it. It's an honor. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thanks a lot.
Destiny appears and overcomes my fears. A simple switch I turn on to a light that keeps burning. My force field repels the best shots that you could take at my chest. You'd think I'm jaded, that I'm mad till the lights are faded. But you're wrong, I've got grace. I'm perfectly happy to fall on my face, 'cause I know that I'm not wrong when I think that I can't take this shit. But I will still help you if I can. I'll save your life, though I had plans. I'll be that giant standing on the shoulders of man. Follow me around the room, and I will change your mood to see me in a different view as you follow me around the room. As I tell this story to you, as I tell my story to you, follow me around the room and stick and fears of what I could do if I just let this creature out to you. My powers would rage and take control, and your sun that fills my soul would burn inside of me. So I say, I just can't deal with this today.